Today, we are diving into a huge shift happening in the global economy. And it was all set off by a single, pretty dramatic court ruling right here in the United States. But this isn't really a story about tariffs. It's about something much bigger: the fundamental rewiring of global trade and how businesses and even whole countries are having to learn to play by a new set of rules that can literally change overnight. Okay, let's just park on this quote for a second because it gets right to the heart of what's going on. It really captures the new reality of global trade. You see, even after a massive legal decision, the one thing that's left standing is this profound, persistent uncertainty. The old framework, gone. But the new one, well, it's a long way from being finished. So our story really kicks off on February 20th, 2026. A shockwave just shoots out from the US Supreme Court, and its tremors were felt almost immediately in boardrooms in Frankfurt, in government offices in New Delhi, all around the world. What happened was this. In a landmark 6-3 decision, the court put a major check on presidential power. They found that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, which is a law designed to deal with, unusual and extraordinary threats, was being used as a kind of blanket tool for trade policy. And that is something it was never, ever intended for. And right here, from Chief Justice Roberts, we see the absolute core of the court's reasoning. The argument really boils down to something fundamental in the Constitution. Tariffs are a tax. And the power to tax, that belongs to Congress, not the president. The court basically said you can't just find that immense power hidden inside the word regulate. So, what did this actually mean in practice? Well, as you can see, the immediate aftermath was messy. While those sweeping IEEPA tariffs were struck down, the trade war was far from over. A whole complex web of other tariffs, like the Section 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum and the Section 301 tariffs aimed at China, they all remained firmly in place. The landscape didn't get simpler, it just got a lot more complicated. So, how did the executive branch respond? Well, it was anything but a retreat. What we saw was a rapid, aggressive pivot that just underscored how unpredictable and volatile trade policy has become. I mean, just look at the speed of this. It's incredible. On February 20th, the court strikes down the tariffs. Just a few hours later, the president announces a new 10% global tariff, just using a different legal authority. And then the very next day, that gets hiked to 15%. So the ruling didn't create stability, it just triggered a whole new round of chaos. And this new legal justification was so crucial. It was Section 122 of the 1974 Trade Act. Now, this is a pretty obscure, rarely used measure. And here's the kicker. It's temporary. It allows for a tariff, but for only 150 days. So this wasn't a new permanent policy. It was a 5-month bridge that basically just hit the reset button on global trade uncertainty. As you can imagine, the ripples from this decision and that rapid-fire response spread across the globe. It forced every major trading nation to stop and completely recalculate its exposure to what was now a highly unpredictable US market. And out of all this chaos, we're seeing two very different strategies emerge. On one hand, you've got players like the European Union and India. They're hitting the accelerator on a huge free trade agreement, actively building new economic partnerships to create some stability. But then you've got many Asian producers who are kind of stuck in this wait-and-see mode, holding their breath, hesitant to make big, expensive changes when the rules might just get ripped up again tomorrow. And of course, this volatility hasn't just shaken up governments. It has forced a complete revolution inside the companies that are on the front lines of global trade. We've literally seen trade strategy get pulled out of the back office and plopped right into the boardroom. Get this. For nearly 3/4 of global trade professionals, American tariff policy is now their single biggest headache. That is a massive jump from 41% just a year earlier. It just shows you how central this issue has become to daily business. And because of that huge risk, the once obscure Trade Compliance Department has been thrust right into the spotlight. 40% of these teams now say they have a major influence over C-suite decisions. Why? Because managing tariffs isn't just about paperwork anymore. It's absolutely core to corporate strategy. And the pressure is just immense. We've seen a 3-fold increase in companies choosing to absorb tariff costs themselves. Think about that. They're taking a direct hit to their own profits rather than risk losing customers by raising prices in such a chaotic market. It's a tough choice. So a really key strategy that's emerging from all this is something called friendshoring, and it's a fundamental shift in thinking. The goal is no longer just about finding the supplier with the lowest cost. Now it's about finding the most reliable and politically stable partner, all to reduce your exposure to these wild policy swings. So what we're seeing is companies completely rewriting their operational playbooks. They're adopting China plus one supply chains to spread out their risk. They're building factories local for local to serve regional markets. They're even accelerating investment back into the US. Geopolitical risk is no longer some afterthought. For many, it's now the primary driver of where they put their money. So what does this all add up to? Well, it's pretty clear this isn't just some temporary disruption. We're talking about a fundamental change to the entire operating system of the global economy. And in this new era, the old idea of resilience, the ability to bounce back after a shock, it's just not enough anymore. The World Economic Forum has identified the new goal as readiness, being able to anticipate, adapt, and act decisively in a world of constant change. The winners are going to be those who expect disruption, not those who are just surprised by it every time. Ultimately, the biggest tax of all might not be the 15% tariff. It's the hidden cost of uncertainty itself, the price of simply not knowing what rules are going to apply tomorrow. And that leaves everyone, from CEOs to consumers, asking the exact same question. What is the true long-term price of living in this new normal?
Not sure which skills will move you forward? Skill Tree Learning makes it clear. From SAP and Microsoft to data analytics and generative AI,